How do geniuses come up with ideas? What is common to the thinking style that produced Mona Lisa, as well as the one that spawned the theory of relativity? What characterizes the thinking strategies of Einstein, Edison, Da Vinci, Darwin, Picasso, Michelangelo, Galileo, Freud, and Mozart of history? What can we learn from them? Number 1. Look at a problem in many different ways. As Einstein put it, the problem is to know what the problem is. In an effort to achieve your goals, being resilient and forward-looking is an unfailing way to drive your company forward. There are moments, however, when it is a no-go to charge headfirst into challenges. Indeed, doing so may prove quite disastrous for any endeavor. There are times when the barrier seems to be unmovable, no matter how hard you try. It is important that policymakers build some breathing room on these occasions and focus on the situation. However, as for Leonardo da Vinci, he believed that the first way he looked at a problem was too biased toward his usual way of seeing things, so he would look at a problem from one perspective, then another. With each change, his understanding would grow. Number 2. Make your thoughts visible. To explain his theories, Galileo used diagrams, while his contemporaries only used traditional verbal and mathematical methods. Diagrams can be a strong way of expressing concepts and encouraging new thought. Galileo was able to link the experiment dimension with the theoretical, logical, and mathematical aspects. Well-known experience in designing technical instruments is a necessary element to understand his success with the telescope. His great technical experience alone enabled him to connect the construction and functioning of a machine with the theoretical principles underpinning that very functioning. Number 3. Produce a lot. Most of what geniuses produce is of little value, but because they produce a lot, real winners are more likely to be made. 1,093 patents were held by Thomas Edison, still a record. He gave himself every 10 days a quota of one minor invention and every 6 months a major invention. Before his heart failed him at the age of 72, Asimov, who was identified as a writing machine, wrote over 450 books. More than 600 pieces of music were created by Mozart before he died at 35. Bach wrote a cantata every week, even when he was sick or exhausted. The various drafts of The Wasteland by S. Eliot constitute a jumble of good and poor passages that ultimately became a masterpiece. Number 4. Think in opposites. Geniuses were able to think of different ideas, so ambivalence between opposites or two contradictory subjects could be accepted. In his 1990 book, The Emerging Goddess, The Creative Process in Art, Science, and Other Fields, Dr. Albert Rothenberg, a noted expert on the creative process, recognized this ability in a large range of geniuses, including Einstein, Mozart, Edison, Pasteur, Joseph Conrad, and Picasso. Niels Bohr, a physicist, claimed that if you keep opposites together, you suspend your perception and transfer your mind to a new level. The suspension of thought enables an intellect to behave and establish a new form beyond thought. The swirling of opposites provides the conditions to bubble free from your mind for a new point of view. The ability of Bohr to picture light as both a particle and a wave contributed to his conception of the complementary principle. This seems to be a very common trait among the super-creative. They constantly turn thoughts inside out. What if we grew younger rather than older, for example? Number 5. Make connections. We have been taught to process knowledge and to be critical thinkers based on what has happened in the past. We stop thinking once we think we know how to get the answer, based on what we have been taught. We have the capacity to make common connections between similar subjects. We are much better at linking two things than pushing ourselves to see ties between things that seem to have no relation. We build mental barriers between the interaction of related concepts and non-related concepts. We are all born spontaneous and creative. We embraced all sorts of outlandish possibilities as kids. We realized that a box was much more than just a shell. A box could be a fort, a vehicle, a tank, a cave, a home, something to draw on, a helmet for space. Our thoughts were not organized according to any current idea or category. Number 6. Conceptual blending. Creativity emerges from the basic mental operation of mixing different subjects conceptually. Creative concepts, when studied, are often fresh variations of old ideas. In general, a poet does not write new words, but instead brings old words together in a new way. Geniuses, in comparison, think productively, not reproductively. They ask themselves, when faced with a dilemma, how many different ways they can look at the question, how they can consider it, and how many different ways they can solve it. They seem to come up with several different replies, some of which are unconventional and possibly distinctive. Number 7. Force relationships. In one particular way of thinking about artistic genius stands out. It is the ability to establish juxtapositions between various subjects. To link the unconnected, call it a facility that helps them to see something that others are blind to. A relationship was forced by Leonardo da Vinci between the sound of a bell and the stone hitting water. This made it possible for him to make the connection that sound travels in waves. Samuel F. B. Morse tried to work out how a telegraph signal could be produced powerful enough to transmit all the way across the United States. He saw horses being exchanged at a relay station one day, and that gave him the idea that periodic power boosts could be provided by a traveling signal. Number 8. Finding what you are not looking for. We end up doing something else if we try something and fail. It is the first concept of creative accident, as simple as that assertion might sound. It is not chance, but the highest order of artistic instinct. Alexander Fleming was not the first physician to observe mold forming when researching deadly bacteria in an exposed culture. This obviously meaningless case may have been trashed by a less gifted physician. The discovery led to penicillin, which saved millions of lives. The future world will require capacities that have until now been mere choices. We are living in a time of vast changes, including accelerated globalization, increasing volumes of knowledge, growing science and technology hegemony, and the clash of civilizations. In schools, companies, and professions, these developments call for a new way of thinking creatively. Number 9. Think metaphorically. Aristotle regarded metaphor as a sign of genius, claiming that a person of special talents was a person who had the ability to perceive parallels between two different areas of life and connect them together. If things are so similar in some respects, unlike things maybe they are not so in others. The analogy between the inner workings of the ear and the movement of a stout piece of membrane to transfer steel was discovered by Alexander Graham Bell, and the telephone was devised. After forming an analogy between a toy funnel and the movements of a paperman and sound vibrations, Thomas Edison invented the phonograph in a single day. By studying how shipworms tunnel through timber by first building tubes, underwater construction was made possible. Number 10. Prepare yourself for new chances. We end up doing something else if we try to do something and fail. We may be wondering why we have failed to do what we wanted, and this is the planned, rational thing to do. The creative accident, however, poses another question: what did we do? Alexander Fleming was not the first physician to note the mold produced during the study of deadly bacteria in an exposed culture. This apparently insignificant case may have been ruined by a less talented physician, but Fleming noted it as fascinating and wondered if it had potential. Thomas Edison was mindlessly playing with a piece of putty while pondering how to make a carbon filament, spinning and twisting it in his fingers as he stared down at his hands. The solution reached him between his eyes: twist the carbon like a rope. The first concept of science methodologists was stressed by F.B. Skinner. When you find something interesting, drop everything else and research it. So often hesitate to answer the knock of opportunity at the door because they need to complete some preconceived plan. Creative geniuses do not wait for the gifts of chance. Instead, accidental discovery is aggressively pursued.